Hello, hello, hello. This is Misty Magdalena Grace with the new and improved version of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, where we talk about spirituality, psychedelics, plant medicine, microdosing, and really that journey within to finding your best innate wisdom, to your best health, your best wealth through all sorts of inner child healing, trauma release, grief recovery, overcoming addictions, and working with the mind, the body, and spirit. So go ahead, leave a review, subscribe, download. We look forward to your feedback. Thanks for tuning in today. All right. Well, hello, everyone tuning in on the live. Happy New Year. Again, this is actually my first guest of 2025. And wow, we're in for a treat today. I'm so excited. I just want to first welcome you if you're new to my channel, whether you're on YouTube or if you're on iTunes, wherever you find me. Please, if you enjoy this, subscribe, stay a while. I am a mind, body, spirit alchemist and yogi. We're going to talk a little bit more about Kundalini yoga today. So just super excited because we're here to help you be inspired. We're here to help you be educated, empowered, and equipped with tools that can help you really heal your health challenges, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, as well as wealth. And that doesn't necessarily mean money. Abundance, prosperity comes in so many different forms. And then, of course, the wisdom that my guests bring. I'm very picky about my guests. So if you're new to my channel, just know that I always make sure I bring on seasoned veterans or experts who also have beautiful hearts of compassion and a lot of gifts and medicine of their own to share. So without further ado, I do want to mention one last thing. If you're tuning in live, because I do see some eyeballs on the show, you can actually ask questions later. You can participate. You're like a live studio audience. So if you're listening on the replay and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to stay connected. When do I know when the next show is coming up? Just hop on my email list or subscribe to my YouTube channel and you'll be in the know. So I'm so excited. I met Sita not too long ago. It was just a few months ago, and it seems like many lifetimes ago now since I started my Kundalini yoga certification last year. A lot of you have heard of me talk about it. I've had only one other guest in the 4 years and almost 400 shows ever to talk about Kundalini yoga. We're also going to talk about Ayurvedic medicine and the Breath of Fire documentary, which is highly controversial depending on who you are and how you receive it. But Sita is an Ayurvedic practitioner. She is the co-director of the Kundalini studies at the Soul of Yoga, which is where I found her. And she's a yoga therapist. So Sita, I'm so honored to have you to talk about all these beautiful things today. And we'll let you take over here and just share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. These are some of my absolute favorite topics. You've already said things and I'm like, oh, we have to talk about this. Oh, we have to talk about that. So I can't believe we only have a short period of time. Yeah, so for me, you've said sort of my title and my roles. And I think the main thing is that these are the things that really matter to me. People will ask me, how did you get into this kind of work? And I always say it got into me. I think it was really always my path. I'm a multisensory, so I'm clairvoyant, clairsentient, clairaudient. I'm wide open channel as as many of us are when we're born. But I was really blessed to have a mother. My mom was a single mother, and she was so open. She was teaching me about the chakras when I was young. She had me become a Reiki master when I was 13 because to her that was an important life skill. Okay, so this is where I was raised. I was really blessed. Not that it was bunnies and rainbows, but the parts of me that needed to express and be able to say, oh my gosh, I just saw an angel. I was able to say those things and I wasn't crazy. And so, I think because of my sensitivity, also there was sort of like my own dark side to it. My mom went into recovery from alcoholism when I was 9. And so I was going to 12-step meetings with her. I grew up in the 12 steps, but I turned to substances myself at a time because my high levels of sensitivity, I just was like, I needed to numb them. I did not know how to regulate myself. And, because of some childhood situations and just patterning that I had, I really didn't have the inner foundation to see myself through my level of sensitivity, some of the trauma that I had experienced. And so I too turned to substances. In an unproductive way. I'm a big advocate of plant medicines. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But I really was mishandling myself and mishandling them. But the beautiful thing about that was I had this moment of clarity. I was agoraphobic. I was well over 250 pounds, which for me is a lot of weight. It wouldn't necessarily be for everyone. I'm not playing the weight game. But for me, that would be a significant amount of weight, which it was. But I was on 13 different medications for head medications, and half of those were for the side effects of the first half of the medications that I was on. And so I ended up in a psych ward, and I was a mess. And I had this moment of clarity where I heard this voice say, "You got yourself into this. You get yourself out of it." And it was like this energy just came through me. And in some ways, I'm not saying it was bunnies and rainbows, but the clouds sort of parted for me at that moment. And I went to my mom the next day, who was sober, had many years sober at that time, had met my adopted father in AA, and he was also sober, and they had been for years. And I just said, "I'm really scared to share this because I feel like if I do, I'm going to have to stop. And I don't know what to do if I don't have this, but I need to tell you that I've been drinking like a lot. And that's really been the problem. I've been smoking a lot of weed, and that's really been the problem. I'm not sure how much mental illness I actually have. I just know that I really need help." And from that moment on, that was actually January 4th, 1998. So I just celebrated 27 years. Um, that was really the beginning, like a new dawn for me. And even though I have worked with plant medicines, I guide people through those processes as well. Like I don't use it so much myself at this point, but I have not picked up a drink or used anything outside of my ability to self-regulate. Certainly have not had a drink. But I say all of that to say I've always been a sensitive soul, and I've always been able to see things in ways that a lot of people around me couldn't. And I know people like you and a lot of the people who would be watching this relate to that. And that's why I want to share that, I think this is why community really is so important. This is why podcasts like this are so important, and trainings like the Kundalini training are so important, because it's not just that we get to receive valuable teachings and lessons from people that maybe we wouldn't have otherwise been introduced to, but we get to be in the shared experience of like, wow, like I actually fit somewhere. I might be a misfit, but I fit. you know? And I think that's the sort of the drum that many of us, have, that we're beating. And so when my work now, it really did come to me, and I know that I was most likely already geared to do the work that I do in the world. And that it was it's my dharma. Basically, it's what wants to come out of me. It's what's so natural, because I believe that I have spent lifetimes working with what I do now, and I get to experience the culmination of lifetimes of wisdom that wants to come through me. And I believe that's true for a lot of people. And that's part of what I love about teaching and working with people, because I usually do work with people like us. And, it's like our brilliance in our special way is so normal to us. And we've normalized it so much that we forget it's actually what makes us so dynamic, unique, and special. And so I love being in communities that really call it and name it and say, "Oh my God, you're amazing at that. Let's support you, and let's help you grow, and let's help you be that thing." Um, and so really, as an Ayurvedic practitioner and a yoga therapist and a teacher, like that's really what I feel like I do. If you're having health issues, there's a reason for it most of the time. And it's usually mental or emotional. Let's talk about that. Yeah, we can talk about diet and herbs and all that good stuff. Sure. That's the easy part. But let's like really deep dive into what's happening into your energy field and your mind, and karmas and family lineage patterns and all of those things, which I know you know very, very well. So I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir here, but So I know that's a lot, but that's just me. I am the culmination of lifetimes of a variety of karmas, and life has not been easy for me. And yet I don't think it's easy for anyone these days. And so I do my best to take it all in stride and use these teachings that we have been gifted from the indigenous people of India, to really help me see my way through.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for all of that and for honoring the misfits. I call them the outcasts. I always felt like, and I joke about this, and I'm not saying it in a negative way, but I
Mhm.
was like the redheaded stepchild, right? And always felt different, always was weird, and then that hurts, right? After a while,
Yeah.
you pretend it's something you're bragging about or prideful, but there was a lot of pain underneath that. And that's, of course, when I turned to alcohol and all of these
Mhm.
different things to numb out. Social media, smartphone addiction is like the gateway drug to cocaine, and just helping people regulate their central nervous system, right? And go within and be curious, not judgmental about our sensitivities. It's such a beautiful place to be, that you
Mhm.
are and where I am at, and we're still on the journey, right?
Yeah.
So with that, Sita and I have an inside joke there, because she knows I've had the kind of a week from hell. I'm just going to put it out there, and I'm always honest with my audience.
Mhm.
I'm transparent, because 4 years ago when I started this podcast, there was even one time I was halfway drunk on one of my shows, because
Mhm.
that's how
Mhm.
lost I was, and how many I was wearing these masks, and pretending to be someone I wasn't. And
Mhm.
so I just give you out there who are listening permission to really lean into what we're talking about here, because it may change your life and it may save a life. I'm passionate about suicide awareness and mental health, and January, seasonal affective disorder, this time of the year, the
Oof.
inauguration coming up, there's so much going
Yeah.
on in the world that can trigger you, right? And so I'd love to hear, you mentioned these teachings from India. I think this would be a good segue for you to explain Kundalini yoga, because
Mhm.
there's a lot of people out there that don't know what it is. And I knew I had heard of it 10 plus years ago, but I was like, oh, that woo woo, that weird, like whatever, I kind of thought of it as like a baby yoga, because I didn't understand it. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have forgotten the judgment and gone and played with Kundalini 10 years ago. So tell us more.
Yeah. So, and I'll start this by saying that a lot of people, in their understanding of Kundalini yoga, when they think of it or are familiar with it, where their mind goes to is the Kundalini really as taught by Yogi Bhajan. It's the more westernized version, right? And so we want to, for me, it's important to sort of delineate which is which, because I we'll get to more about Yogi Bhajan. Um, because there really is there's a lot to say about him and all of that. But what I want to say is that the true teachings of Kundalini energy and Kundalini yoga originated in the Tantra tradition, not white Tantra. White Tantra was something that Yogi Bhajan sort of created. Basically, it was not an original form of Tantra. So there's a few different, there's the red, there's the white, and there's the black forms of Tantra. Now, originally, Tantra even predates the Vedas, the Vedic texts, which are at least 5,000 years old. And in those teachings, it talks about the different ways that this energy called Kundalini Shakti, so Shakti being the creative force, the creative impulse of the universe, that essentially you can imagine that we have let's just say a droplet of, for the sake of our conversation, um, and its symbolism is in the form of a serpent. And so the serpent is something that we can look at many indigenous cultures and many indigenous medicines and see the serpent show up. A lot of different or original peoples, let's say, were very aware of the power of this serpent energy. In India, it is represented as Kundalini Shakti. And so it is said that the Kundalini energy is something that sort of is this sleeping serpent at the base of the spine, is how you'll usually hear about it. And as we do certain practices, like pranayama or breathing techniques, is one of the primary ways that we actually help to raise the Kundalini energy because of the way that it impacts the cerebral spinal fluid in the body. And so the more that we work on the specific exercises, Yogi Bhajan sort of brought his own, and I believe that many of them were channeled, because they do touch on they do touch on when the actual physical practices to raise Kundalini, which you did not do asana originally. The actual physical asanas didn't come for thousands of years. It was really breathing techniques and purifying techniques. Did not have any real physicality to it. But when they started coming to the surface thousands of years ago, there are certain kriyas that we do. Many of the kriyas that we do with the Kundalini yoga is taught by Yogi Bhajan, that look very similar to what some of those purifying techniques are. So this all makes this energy move up the central channel. We call it the Sushumna, but you can imagine it's the spinal cord of the energy body. That's the easiest way to say it. And so once it comes up, and it will meet in basically the pineal and the pituitary glands, but in chakra talk, it's this sixth chakra, and it's our bindu, which is sort of in the back of the head. And so there's a meeting of the sleeping serpent that's up in the head with the serpent that has just risen, and together we say that that's sort of the Shiva Shakti. That's the masculine feminine. That's the creative forces of Purusha consciousness, and Prakruti, another form of that Shakti activation, if you will. And once they come to life, what happens is parts of your brain that have been essentially dormant start to reactivate, or they start to activate for the first time. And so there's a lot of speculation from the Kundalini Tantra scientists. There are some who have said that geniuses and child prodigies were born most likely with their Kundalini already risen. This is something that can happen if that is your karma, if that is your dharma, or if you had parents that were already very enlightened or already positioned to be enlightened beings, that a child can actually be born that actualized, so that their circuitry is already open, and basically they're kind of geniuses to begin with, and they don't have to do all of the work that us lay people have to do. um, so I mean, I could go on for hours and hours about the Kundalini energy, but it really is, if you just imagine, it is the creative force of the universe that moves through your system, and it can raise in segments. It doesn't always go up at the same time. It can actually open up in the heart chakra and illuminate those parts of the brain, but it actually hasn't awakened in your other chakras. There's so many different levels and layers to understanding the original tantric or Kundalini tantra teachings of this energy. So we have the westernized version that has a lot of merit to it, and so that's the one that most people are familiar with.
Okay. Yeah. And just for those that in the audience, it's a lot to take in, but I do want to just share like really quickly. And then if you want to share how Kundalini has helped you, so that people have like you said, some lay person examples. I liken that, having my chakras open, having my, all my organs connected to the vagus nerve, because there's mantras, there's chanting, there's so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't even, we'd be on here for 5 hours if we tried to unpack
Truly.
everything. But I know for me, having had done thousands of hours of vinyasa, hatha, the core power variety, the more like I would say more in my world, it was more masculine, because I was using yoga in that form to cross train as an Ironman triathlete, to cross train, as an athlete just in general, and prevent injury. So this, I like to compare that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, Kundalini helped me with addiction recovery,
Mm-hmm.
grief recovery,
Mhm.
And in my mind, it does prevent me from more pain and suffering that I could if I wasn't rising the Kundalini Shakti and really grounded and leveraging the power of the mantra and the mudras and the ancient yogic,
Mhm.
technologies or whatever you want to call it. I could really be more depressed. I have lots of reasons to be that right now. Like I could just be in a funk. I could be blaming seasonal affective disorder. I could say I have it, right? Or I could just be blaming, a lot of things in my life externally. But I'm taking the power in my own hands and my own body, helping awaken all of these parts of myself, balancing my organs out so that I can have more joy, so that I can have more authentic, natural energy as opposed to drinking lots of coffee or whatever, and it has helps awaken the heart chakra. There's so many benefits, so that's how it's helped me, and I actually came to it over almost 4 years ago because of addiction, so kind of similar to your story, and because of just immeasurable amounts of grief and loss that I kind of had just really stuck all over inside of me. When the body keeps the score, I was
Mhm.
living a lot of scores that I had kept, that I was numbing out and not really finding solutions. So Kundalini yoga for me was one of those key solutions besides plant medicine. But here's the deal. I don't sit with plant medicine anymore myself. I serve it.
Mhm.
I didn't want to, abuse that medicine. It's not meant to be abused either. It's not something you can do every day. However, Kundalini yoga can be a lifestyle, and it can be interwoven with Ayurvedic nutrition, which I know we'll get to next. But I just wanted to share a little bit about my why and what it's helped me and my clients with, and anything else you want to share about it for your story, Sita, would be great.
Yeah, for me, I feel like it's almost like it's done so much, it's hard to even describe and explain. But I feel like when I went to my first Kundalini class, I had no idea what I was going into. Like, I think maybe I had seen a Kundalini class, like, on a DVD or something a few years earlier and didn't really think a lot of it. It just wasn't my time. And so we happened to move down the street, or not even down the street. It was literally 12 feet away. Our new house that we were living in at the time had a yoga studio, like 12 feet away, where I could like roll out of bed and be there. Not an exaggeration at all. Um, and so, loving yoga, I was already an Ayurvedic person at the time. And so I went to this class and it was like, what is going on? What is this? Because it was it. I mean, I will let my freak flag fly all day long. Like I'm not the judgy type. If it's weird, I'm there. But at the same time, I'm like, there's a lot of people enrolled in this weird situation. This is really interesting. And yet I left and I was like, I need more of that. It was, it's one of the things I think that when we're moving so fast in life and we're constantly in our minds that we miss the subtle. And when I left that class, I was so tuned into the subtle, the nuances within myself that I hadn't been in a very, very long time, if ever. So, I mean, you heard some of my story. Like, I had to come out of being very obese for my frame, and there was a lot to unpack there for me. I've had to do a lot of work. I'm a dance teacher, actually. And it's a somatic form of dance. I have had to work and spend a lot of time on my relationship to my physical body, like a lot of us do in our own way. So, I have my story. Mostly everyone has their own story. For me, it was, even though I'd been working with people for years, I knew a lot of the things, I still was constantly on the go. Everything was about a checklist, everything was about doing things 110%. Um, and I would go from one thing to the next without even thinking about it, and I walked out of that class, and I felt myself relaxed in a way that was totally unfamiliar, and I knew something in me had shifted, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And so, while that might not sound like, "Oh, wow, that's huge," for me, that was the game changer, because it put me in a place to hear and pay attention to this higher part of myself so instantaneously in such a profoundly subtle yet powerful way that I couldn't deny that something was happening. And so I knew I wanted more, and I it has not been out of my life since. It's been a regular part of my life ever since. And so that all of that has strengthened in me more. But here's the other piece. For me, as someone who, like many of us, being highly empathic, highly tuned in intuitively, having like very open spidey senses all the time, like many of us do, what I loved was that I started to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not taking on all this other crap anymore. I can discern when someone's energy is coming at me and I don't want it in my field. I can just observe it. And so it was things like that that just blew my mind that I was not expecting. And for me, that's really only the beginning of it, but probably the first initial major shifts for me.
That's beautiful. Yeah, you talk about subtleties, having been an athlete, we had to work hard, we had to bleed, we had to sweat, you had to go through all of this, that masculine energy. And I
Mhm.
feel like Kundalini helps soften you so that you can be more intuitive, more feminine, more balanced in both of those energies, and also the polarities that I don't know if you want to say anything more about that before we go on to the nutrition side, because that's a huge part of it too. But the polarities, the shadow and the light, a lot of times, using fitness as another analogy, never let them see you sweat, just fake it till you make it, just be a positive Pollyanna, read more self-help books. Okay, I did all that and I was miserable and wanted to die in 2020. Okay. So when I found Kundalini, it was like, wait, kind of, Carl Jung has also endorsed Kundalini. There's a great book about it. But anyway, understanding the unconscious mind and bringing it up in a sacred space. Like I'll cry in my kriyas, I'll cry in classes, I'll really feel connected to spirit, all of those things. It allows you so much humility and safe space to then also move your body and get the health benefits too, and to honor those darkness and light together, I think is such a brilliant combination. So anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, for me, it's, you know, Kundalini yoga and the yogic teachings in general have become about being able to hold my full spectrum. And so going from this, we can easily say that we're in a polarity planet, right? We're in a cosmic cycle called the Kali Yuga, and it lasts almost a half a million years. I mean, it is a very long period of time. And we're in the Kali Yuga right now. Some people argue that we've already come out, we're just coming out. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. Even if we are, we still have the shadow of it. We're still under the influence of it, even if we have come out of it. My sense is we're still in it. But anyway, the Kali Yuga is the Iron Age, where it is about being spiritually confused and confused in general, and there's more chaos. And what that's asking us to do is leaning into our true self, not the true self that we believe ourselves to be. It's unpacking all of these identifiable characteristics and really being in the understanding of I am awareness itself. That
Mm,
is who and what I am. And when we are in that state, that is when that sense of dualism and polarity disappear, because we experience the spectrum of all that is and have such a deep awareness that there is so much more beyond this finite version of ourselves, and that we are a part of all of that. And so that for me, I think, we talk about Kundalini yoga being the Ferrari to higher consciousness, and this is why. I mean, I spend a lot of time studying and reading the Upanishads and the Vedas and like the Bhagavad Gita and the sacred texts of India, and how are they relevant now. The Yoga Sutras are really beautiful, and they are all giving us the permission to explore ourselves, to not make ourselves wrong for anything. One of the really quickly, one of the four pillars of the Vedas are that we have the right living, It's called Artha, Artha, but it's that we have the ability and the capacity to take care of ourselves. Materialism, not in a greedy, superficial kind of way. So that, it's even indicating, even though a lot of people have money stuff, for example, the Vedas are like, no, if you can't take care of yourself, you will not have the same orientation towards doing all of the other stuff, because you'll be so worried about survival, and then you're not able to give of yourself in a true way, which is one of the biggest things of the teachings, of the ancient teachings of India. um and so, and there, right, I said there are four. I'll say the three more. I could literally go on for days.
I know.
um, so hold on though, because this, unless we want the cliffhanger.
We'll do a second one. We'll do a second one later. Okay.
So, so we have like the right use of living, but we also have kama, Kama. That's pleasure.
Mm,
Pleasure. And again, that's not about overdoing it. If we want to bring in a shout out to the Ayurvedic medicine piece, which I hopefully will get to. If I don't shut up, we won't.
it's okay.
But one of the core reasons why in Ayurveda we say that we get sick is the overuse, the underuse, or the misuse of the senses. But we
Mm,
don't make anything wrong. There is a time and a place for everything. Something that is a medicine for me could be a poison for you, and vice versa, right?
1000%.
But
Yeah.
pleasure, sexual pleasure, food pleasure, the pleasures of life are part of being alive and part of being in this dimension. It's learning how to self-regulate, but not making ourselves feel guilty for wanting to experience pleasure. And so we also have dharma. We have it in dharma. A lot of people think of dharma and they're like, oh, it's like my purpose in the world. It's my, and that's not wrong. That is certainly a way to look at it, but really karma or dharma is about your right place in the universe. What's the highest resonance for you? What are your gifts? Do that and serve and be a good person. And then the last one is moksha. It's liberation. So it's we get to this place of liberation where we are free to share because we have taken care of our material selves. We are eating, we have food, we have relationships, we have the pleasures with kama, and we are able to then liberate ourselves. And so, when I think of the dualism and the polarity, it's like, no, when we follow these teachings, we can understand that our experience of duality is the way that we truly have been programmed, which we know all of this. But the Vedas and the Upanishads and these Indian teachings show us, or the Hindu, they're not all Hindu. It's a whole other topic. But
Yeah.
they show us how to dissolve this sense of polarity, and so that we're not at war with ourselves anymore. That's the whole reason for the Bhagavad Gita.
Beautiful. No, I think it's good to know and understand some of the teachings too, as it calls to those who are listening, so they have a deeper sense. Because when someone thinks or hears the word yoga, I mean, there's probably like 1,000 different ways that it can come up. And since this is a lifestyle, and I know you even, I think you called it it can be the spiritual path, or, that's some of the language, that I've heard and referenced. And I know part of that path you talked about right living, and a lot of that nutritional component. Maybe this would be a good time to tap into the Ayurvedic nutrition. What is it and how does it fit into Kundalini?
Yeah, so it's I always feel like the father in my big fat Greek wedding who thinks Greek fits in everywhere, and it was like the original everything. I'm like, oh, Ayurveda fits in everywhere. Like, yeah, I'm like such an evangelist. Um, so it fits in that, Ayurveda, a lot of people, similar to yoga, when people think of yoga as postures, when that's not even maybe 5% of what yoga is. With Ayurveda, a lot of people will reduce it down to herbs and food, which is definitely a part of what it is. But it really is a way of working with the mind, body, spirit paradigm from the perspective of whole person health. So originally it was like our preventative medicine. And so traditionally villages would have their families would have their own Ayurvedic doctor, usually shared by a village, and the doctor would come to their house and use whatever plants or whatever was in their environment. Like, think local, right? We talk about eating seasonally and locally as much as possible. That's because what is around us has the highest amount of intelligence for what we need. In Ayurveda, your environment is your extended body. And so if a family was to get sick, that Ayurvedic doctor would actually be fired, because it would mean that they were not actually adequately doing their job. I'm not saying
Wow.
I support that, because for all we know, that family was sneaking whatever junk food was available at the time. I
Right,
don't
right.
know. I'm just sharing the story. So um, everything that we ingest, whether it's our food or our environment, our mind, body, and spirit all have to be able to digest and process and assimilate it. And so when we're working with something like Kundalini yoga, one of the things that we're doing is we are doing a lot of purifying. We are purifying the body of any toxins, which can obviously be foods, but can also be mental toxins. So, something with Ayurvedic medicine and nutrition as well is a lot of people say, "Gosh, but I eat so healthy. I don't understand what's going on with my body." And it's like, right, but like salad isn't good for a lot of people because the body can't digest it, right? And a lot of people don't realize that. It just sits in the stomach, it ferments, and then your blood goes toxic. And then all this stuff is just circulating and going in to your organs, and it's not clean blood. And it's like, because I ate a salad, like, are you kidding me? So, I mean, that's like I know a crazy example, but just to kind of get your mind thinking that something that is healthy for one person is not healthy for another. And so we do a practice like Kundalini yoga because it will meet us at the level of our needs. It reminds me a lot of plant medicine in a way, if you will. And I say this with deep respect, where, with plant medicines, it knows what we need. I compare that to breast milk, like a breast the colostrum and the breast milk coming out of a mother is exactly what that baby needs, because the body knows. I see the same thing with plant medicines, and I see the same thing with these different forms of yoga and these teachings. So Kundalini yoga is going to burn away the impurities of the mind, the things that we have not been able to digest or process or assimilate that get stuck in our mind, just like a food that can't move through the system. And so what starts to happen is, once we have done it enough and we're doing it consistently enough, we're keeping the purification process going, which is a huge thing in all forms of yoga, because it is that purification that is what gives us the ability to really work with the mind and to raise that kundalini energy, because we've created the environment where the energy has the capacity to work on us. So it's
Mhm.
all very related.
Yeah, and food is your medicine. Food, herbs, plants, they're all related consciousness, right? They're here to
Very
help
much.
us, or like you said, could hurt. So for example, when I found Ayurvedic medicine, I took a course. As of course, I found Kundalini first, led me to Ayurveda, and I took the dosha quiz. And if you don't know what
Mhm.
the dosha is, Google it, DOSHA. But there's a primary three doshas, and I found out I was a Pitta, which, hello, red hair, Viking ancestry, go figure, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, so that's why I tend to be more fiery. I can tend to anger. So when my good girl self would numb out, and that's why I drank alcohol, was to like numb that, that fire, that anger, because I thought it was bad. And when I found, like, for example, the fists of, is it called the fist of anger, fist of
Yeah,
rage,
fist of
that
anger. Yeah, I love that one.
inside of Kundalini, and it helps purge or purify the fire and brings, the balance to the digestive fire, which we all have. I had digestive issues for 40 years of my life. I'm like going, oh my God, if I would have known that. And then, yeah, growing up in, the US, people will eat salads year round. We're programmed to this certain way of, Atkins diet. I mean, I left the fitness industry because I couldn't stand it, with all these different diets and fads and weight loss, low calorie, fat free this and gluten free that, and not even realizing, the capitalist side of all of that. When you come to the foods that are for winter, spring, summer, the herbs, the other things that can help balance it through Kundalini, it's just like, oh my gosh, this just makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's I love that it honors each unique person. We have, we have I'm not going to get into the technical terms, but we have the dosha that we're born with, and then we have the dosha that's out of balance. And sometimes it's the dosha that we're born with that we're working with, but other times we have to work with the imbalance. And that is one of the key things for an Ayurvedic practitioner to look at is, where is the overuse or underuse or misuse of this person's sensory perceptions contributed to a doshic pattern that is outside of what is natural to them, because that is what the root of the disease will be. And that's really what we do, is we look at the root cause of something, and we don't necessarily just like treat the symptoms. We sometimes we do because they're uncomfortable, and so we want to work with them, but at the same time we have to be working with what's at the root. And in the Kundalini practices, we're always working with the lymphatic system. We're working with the endocrine system. We're working with so many systems of the body, the digestive system. We're also working with the chakra system. So it's like we're working with all of these different systems on all the different planes of existence in these classes. And so that is part of why it aligns so beautifully with Ayurvedic medicine, is because, and again, most forms of yoga they are all dealing with all of this, but there is something about Kundalini, because we're using the combination of pranayama, like you were saying, pranayama, mantra, mudra, like with the hand gestures. There's so many things that we're accessing at the same time is what makes it so potent.
Beautiful. Yeah. I just want to take a moment because we have a few more people watching us. I see the numbers climbing. So if you're just joining us, I'm Misty Magdalena Grace interviewing Sita. We're talking about Kundalini yoga, Ayurvedic medicine. And because of time, I want to transition into the Breath of Fire documentary, because I know we could probably talk for a while, but I just wanted to let you know, if you're on the live, really encourage you to share this interview. And if you even want to, you'll see it scrolling on the screen, comment below with questions, thoughts, hashtag live. Tell us where city, state, country you're tuning in from. We'd love to acknowledge you. And if we have time, we'll also answer your beautiful, beautiful questions. So anything that you want to say in finality with Ayurvedic medicine and Kundalini yoga itself?
No, I'm going to pipe down.
It's all good. All good. Don't worry. I'm going to have you back for a second, probably a third interview as we go on, because I know you're going to be doing potentially a cleanse in the spring and all of those beautiful things. So we are all about getting to the root causes of your health, wealth, relationship issues here. And so this is such a robust topic. And part of what I think we want to build an awareness, and I'm going to share my experience with the documentary and then turn it over to you. But when I saw the documentary called The Breath of Fire, and it was, an HBO thing, pretty big time out there, and I want to say it was September, October. I happened to watch it in November, and I was appalled. I was disappointed. I was like, oh my gosh, if people see this, and this is how it's maybe even their introduction to Kundalini yoga, it breaks my heart to think about, because they share the story of Yogi Bhajan and bringing, this Kundalini yoga technology here, and the dogma, the abuse of women, the abuse of people, this humanity, and the people who had, big hearts and wanted to serve. And essentially, I know there is a religious component to it too. So there was just like this whole almost like brainwashing cult like experience that by itself is just awful. But then to put it in the same sentence as, well, this is what Kundalini yoga is, it's not fair. And so I wanted to be vocal about it. Sita was more than happy to talk about it. And she's already alluded a little bit to Yogi Bhajan and how she has even separated herself from and our own certification and all of that
Mhm.
is separated from that because we're not in alignment
Mhm.
with his actions and his way of being. So if you haven't seen Breath of Fire documentary, I'm not sure I want to encourage you to watch it. But if you have, well, then we'll be talking about it. So Sita, that was my 2 cents, and I'll let you take
Mhm.
over.
And trigger warning if you're going to watch it, for sure, without a doubt. Well, I think actually the first thing I want to say is when my co-director Dana Reese, she asked if I would step in as her co-director just this past spring. I guess it was April 2024. And when my husband and I had our own yoga studio, we had actually changed the name. We had gotten rid of the name Kundalini Yoga because we didn't want the association. And I had actually told Dana that I was backing away a little bit more from the teacher training because I'd been teaching for a while. And even though Dana had long since made the decision to back away from the governing board of Kundalini Yoga, I just was feeling more and more uncomfortable. And so and tuned in woman. And so when she reached out to me, knowing all of this about me, and asked if I would step in as co-director at a really pivotal point in my own life, I was like, okay, this has my attention because this is kind of bizarre that this is even happening. And so I sat with it a lot. I talked to my husband about it a lot. And I want to say to Dana and the credit of the Soul of Yoga, it's one of the reasons why, I tell people I don't love the Soul of Yoga because I teach for them. I took the role to teach for them because I love and believe in them and I respect them and I admire them. To their credit, when I said, I will take this role on, but I have to have the freedom to be able to share openly. I will not create a smear campaign. I will not be disrespectful. I will keep it elevated, but I'm not spiritually bypassing and not looking some of this stuff in the face. And so I need to know that we can be open and there's conversation around it. And they were like, oh my God, absolutely. We wouldn't want it any other way. And Dana said, yeah, in fact, I let people know that we've backed away from all of that. We don't use, Yogi Bhajan's name and some of his quotes. And I let them know before they sign up for the training that, because we don't want any surprises. So I felt like I could step into this role because there is such a space for being, once again, with the full spectrum, right? And so um the challenge for me when I watched the documentary, even though I knew about all of these things, hearing Yogi Bhajan say certain things, which I'm not going to say out loud, but there are things that he actually said through his own mouth where it was heinous. To me, it was heinous. And so what in all of the explorations that I have done for myself, I understand that part of the structure and the way that the Kali Yuga works is we do have a lot of leaders, so-called leaders,
Mm-hmm.
who have these sides and these massive dark sides. You brought up polarity, right? And so I believe that he practiced what he taught in that he was a huge energy. His Kundalini rose, and yet he wasn't pure enough. He didn't do enough of the purification. So I imagine for people who are familiar with the Kundalini energy, some people are scared of it because they're like, oh my gosh, I've heard about this person going psychotic. Like, there is a form of a Kundalini rising. It's called Kali, which is named after the destructive goddess Kali, who I absolutely love.
It's right there, right
Oh my
behind
God,
me.
love. Oh my gosh. And dealing with her force on the wrong side is not the best, right? And so, but when that gets activated, what we have are people who can become sort of like monsters. And
Abuse
so,
of power. Yeah.
exactly. And so I feel that he is a representation of someone who rose their Kundalini, had too much power, and then wasn't utilizing it for mostly anything good. But here's the thing. There's even mantras that he made up. And so even though they are true seed sounds, they are mantras that are not mantras that you will find in the Sikh religion or in the Vedas. But here's the trippy part. One of them is Satanama, which is known as Kirtan Kriya.
Yeah.
There have been scientific studies that show how it changes the brain to the point where it is used as a method of healing for people who have Alzheimer's. So I bring that up to say, clearly he was channeling some really powerful stuff. And he is a representation of why we have to be responsible for ourselves and our sense of power. He is such an example of that. The other thing that also really bothers me, and it's one of the things that's quite different in our training, is, he would say certain things about the history of Kundalini yoga. Like this was something that, the Sikh warriors did hundreds and hundreds of years ago. My problem with that is that nobody else knows about that. You can't find that on the internet. Many people, including myself, have tried to find historical relevance to that. It can't seem to be found. If anyone knows where that is, I am so willing to be proven wrong here, but I have a really hard time with that. So for me, that's part of that cult-like setup where he could say whatever he wanted to say and people didn't question. And so I know that there are teachers who still sort of regurgitate the stuff that they've learned through him and their teachers. And I feel that this documentary is a huge call to action for anyone teaching Kundalini, is that we don't do that. If we cannot find relevant factual information, then we have no business sharing it. No business, because that is where the cult stuff comes in. It is all about the student having their own experience. And that has to be it. Imposing things on other people, including so-called information or knowledge, that is where the brainwashing is. This is where those things start to happen. And so those are some of the key things that I mean, we don't, again, I'm a talker. We only have so much time, but those are some of the key things that really pop out for me in that documentary. Now, I will say that there are things, obviously, this documentary was meant to be very much against him. And I am not going to defend him in any way, or Guru Jagat, who I learned from for years and backed away from at a point because things felt like they were going askew with her and I could feel it. And then we started seeing validation of it. But things like waking up at 3:30 or 3:45 in the morning, they were making analogous to part of the brainwashing and the things that you were forced to do. Now, maybe Guru Jagat and Yogi Bhajan were forcing people to do that, but I can say, Yogi Bhajan was a Sikh. And in the Sikh religion, waking up at 3:45 in the morning and chanting the Japji is a practice for those who are religious. And that is where the Aquarian sadhana began. And so that is not, it is a misrepresentation to say that getting up that early is part of that brainwashing. It's not. It's something that's just not understood about some of the yogic traditions. We call it Amrit Vela in the Kundalini tradition, when you get up during the sattvic or peaceful time of day before the sun is up, so that you can be in this electromagnetic field of the earth where everything else is more quiet. There's a reason for that. So there are things that I do feel, they don't know, and they were trying to, it's a documentary at the end of the day, and they want numbers. But I can't say that for him or Guru Jagat, that I think of them in high regards.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, having watched it, and some of my guests who've been watching my show, I had a guest in October. We talked about cults. I've shared openly, not not deeply, just out of respect also, but I had a cult wound from MLM's religion. And yes, even in plant medicine,
Mhm.
I've seen so-called shamans abuse their power and prey upon people. So it's predatory behavior. The ego is so big, and you get that greed, that power, which is what we're undoing right now, the Kali Yuga and this spiritual awakening on the planet, whether you call it the Age of Aquarius or whatever.
Yeah.
It's all related. The light is coming in to show the darkness. So the documentary actually was part of showing the darkness. What we're wanting to convey to you as listeners is that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, whatever that phrase, right? Like
Mhm.
there's been many different abuses of power, Bikram yoga. I mean, all sorts of,
Yeah.
even Gandhi, I think, had a situation, right?
Yeah.
So
Martin
we're
Luther
all human.
King. Yep.
We're all still very much human. And so the one part I didn't like is like they talked about the Kundalini high, and you could tell a lot of the women, and rightfully so, they were abused and used, and I've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. It was actually very healing to watch the documentary for me, because
Mhm.
I was triggered a few times, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what happened for me when I went through XYZ,
Yeah.
and it's like, wow. So I found compassion actually for Yogi Bhajan. I found compassion for Guru Jagat, because I'm just like that I've been there in my own way.
Yeah.
And it's important to know that, Kundalini isn't about getting high. It's not about all the things that they really just pushed at it because of their own wounding, their
Yeah.
own trauma. So when you watch it, just be aware that a lot of the guests were coming from a place of their own trauma and really angry, and rightfully so. But it wasn't the yoga's fault. It was the container, the set and the setting, and the power that took over.
Which I unfortunately think is the case a lot of the time. Like me personally, I don't have anything against religion. I'm personally not. I mean, I'm a practicing like Hindu, but I don't. You know, I don't have anything against religion. And the parts that have made me very uncomfortable about religion are where too many people have come in with their interpretations of what I believe are probably the true teachings, which is like serve and love and be selfless. Because I feel like if we look at the essence of most teachings, there is this common thread of love your neighbor, be a good person, do good things, contribute. Now, the it's funny. I mean, did they have privilege back in those days? Because I think those, those are all very sort of, some of them are like privileged statements. The world isn't easy for everyone to just serve and do all those things right now. So that's not lost on me either. But it usually is people who come in and kind of mess things up. I actually had a similar thing, and I know we have to wrap up in a second, but I had a similar situation with the 12 steps. And I think I love the 12 steps for a lot of reasons. But when I knew that my time was complete with the 12 steps, that I wasn't relapsing, but I knew that I needed to grow so much more beyond them, and staying in them were just kind of keeping me stuck. And this was after like over a decade.
Yeah.
Um, I lost everyone. The only two people that stood by me were my sponsor and my therapist. Everyone else treated me like in Scientology, when someone leaves, like you're this infected
Yeah.
person. That's how I was
Yes.
treated,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So, unfortunately, it's everywhere, even in places with the best of intentions.
1,000%. Yeah, we're tribal creatures. Like we are getting back to that more and more, but there's still a lot of separation and judgment if you don't believe the same way as I do anymore, and that's happening right now. I just want to remind people, friendships are falling away,
Yeah.
divorce is happening more. I can't even begin to tell you. Like I know so many people separating, divorcing, business partnerships, people upping and just moving and leaving the country because everyone is trying to reclaim that sovereignty. Like my business
Yeah.
name, Lotus Throne Coaching, the throne is that sovereignty. And unfortunately, when you outgrow someone or something, there's grief.
Yeah.
There's what the hell? Wait, you're leaving us? Like what? And I think that's all part of the healing process that's going on right now. So if you're listening, just love yourself, self-care. It's okay. Trust, if it's time to move on, it's time to move on. And I'm proud of you for sharing that, because sometimes I know that can also be a little dicey to share things like that.
Yeah, for sure. But Needs to be said.
Yeah. Well, and if you, again, we're not encouraging you to watch the Breath of Fire documentary. However, it was something that we both wanted to talk about because I know as I go out and teach Kundalini and in recovery centers and grief recovery and healing and even helping with a safe container for spiritual awakening. So you don't go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right?
Yeah.
It's about just really building that awareness and not necessarily just listening to what that documentary has to say. There's value in it, but we just wanted to bring that awareness out to you all today. So check it out if you want. Otherwise, it may not even be worth your time. But just know that the Kundalini itself and the conversation we've had today here on Healthy and Wealthy and Wise is all about having tools in your tool belt to help you be able to have your best health, your best wealth, and your best wisdom. So before we wrap up with our last question, Sita, where can people find you? How can they reach out to you if they want to learn more?
Yeah. So my personal, like my work website is livewiththelightson.com. But if you are just curious now about Kundalini yoga, you can go to the Soul of Yoga. It's just soulofyoga.com and look under trainings, and you can learn more about our training there.
Beautiful. And of course, if you're watching this later at any time, if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to connect you with Sita as well. So info at lotusthronesanctuary.org. And if you have any other interest in checking me out, magdalenagrace.com is where I'm uploading all of my shows, my podcast, my YouTube channel, my offerings, if you're looking for all of the tools. And if you want to come play and do Kundalini with me, I'm excited to be teaching that more this year as well. So I always ask the same question of all of my guests, Sita. So if whether you know what that question is or not, it's the same for every first time guest. And so putting you on the spot, if you don't know it, when you hear the phrase healthy and wealthy and wise, what does that mean for you?
Sovereign and liberated.
Nice. Beautiful. Mic drop. There's nothing more I can add to that. That sounds.
I'm just trying to be short, so.
Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you. You're such a light in the world, and your story is powerful. All the things that you've navigated through and how you help me and all of our participants. Just thank you for who you are, and honored to have you. And I think we will have to have you back in the future. So until next time, everyone, if you saw value in this show and want to stick around again, subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit me up on iTunes, share this show with someone you know who may be struggling with grief, addiction, spiritual awakening, health challenges, financial issues, all of the things, because you just might save a life or at the very, very least enhance someone's life. So until next time, everyone, here's to your best health, your best wealth by trusting your best wisdom. Bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, download, leave a 5-star rating or review, and also please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from this inspirational message. We hope to see you again. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel or join my Facebook community. And if you are looking to manifest your best health, your best wealth by trusting your best wisdom within, please go to my website, www.microdosingforhealth.com. Again, www.microdosingforhealth.com. To quiet your mind, get into your heart, heal your body, and manifest your best health.